My rich ex-boyfriend died and left a Jeopardy game to determine who would inherit. The mahogany conference room smelled like leather and old money, which made sense considering I was sitting across from Marcus Chen's estate lawyer with a certified check for $50 million between us on the table. 3 weeks ago, I was crying into grocery store wine over my dead ex-boyfriend who'd used me as relationship practice for 3 years. Now I was apparently his sole heir. This has to be a mistake, I said, pushing my glasses up my nose with a shaking hand. Marcus left everything to Rebecca, his fiancée. The one he was planning to marry while he was sleeping in my bed. Mr. Goldstein, who looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for expensive estate attorney, adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. Miss Chen, I understand this is unusual. But Mr. Marcus Chen's will is quite explicit. However, there is one significant condition. Of course there was. Even dead, Marcus couldn't make anything simple. The inheritance is contingent upon your participation in what Mr. Chen termed a knowledge competition. It will take place this Saturday at his Malibu estate at 2 p.m. sharp. I stared at him. A knowledge competition. Think of it as Jeopardy. But the categories will all relate to Mr. Chen's life, interests, and experiences. You'll be competing against 5 other potential beneficiaries. My stomach dropped. Let me guess. Rebecca Martinez, the fiancée he forgot to mention for 3 years? Goldstein nodded. Along with his brother David, his mother Patricia, his business partner James Morrison, and his college roommate Kevin Walsh. I knew these people. I'd met them all, been introduced as Marcus's friend while Rebecca got the girlfriend treatment at family dinners I was never invited to. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus had spent our entire relationship keeping me separate from his real life, and now he was forcing me into direct competition with it. What happens if I don't show up? Then the estate defaults to Miss Martinez. Goldstein leaned forward. Miss Chen, may I speak candidly? In 30 years of estate law, I've never seen anything quite like this. Mr. Chen spent months crafting questions, working with a game show production company, even hiring Alex Trebek's former head writer. He was very specific that this wasn't meant to be easy. I thought about my student loan balance, $127,000 and climbing. I thought about my studio apartment in Van Nuys with a broken air conditioning and neighbors who screamed at each other in 3 different languages. I thought about Marcus's penthouse with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same view I'd wake up to on weekend mornings when he'd let me stay over. The other contestants, I said slowly. Do they know about me? About what I was to Marcus? Goldstein's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Chen's will was very detailed about your relationship. Everyone invited will be fully informed before Saturday. So not only would I be competing for Marcus's fortune, I'd be doing it while his family and friends learned that their golden boy had been living a double life. Perfect. Even in death, Marcus had found a way to make everything about maximum drama and minimum emotional consideration. But $50 million was $50 million. And maybe, just maybe, 3 years of pillow talk and intimate confessions had taught me more about Marcus Chen than any of them knew. Fine, I said, surprising myself. I'll play his stupid game. The next morning, I called in sick to my graduate program and drove to Marcus's Malibu house. I needed to see it again before Saturday, needed to walk through the spaces where we'd spent countless hours together. The security code was still my birthday, either the estate hadn't changed it yet, or this was another one of Marcus's elaborate manipulations from beyond the grave. The house looked exactly the same. Sterile white walls, expensive minimalist furniture that nobody was actually supposed to sit on, and that ridiculous infinity pool that Marcus had insisted made him feel spiritually connected to the Pacific. I'd always thought it just made him feel rich. I was standing in his home office, running my fingers along the spines of books he'd never read but displayed because they looked impressive, when I heard the front door slam. You have got to be fucking kidding me. I turned around to find Rebecca Martinez in the doorway, looking like she'd stepped out of a Nordstrom catalog even in her grief. Designer black dress, perfect blowout, and an expression that could have melted steel. Rebecca. I straightened up, trying to look like I belonged here. I'm sorry for your loss. She laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. My loss? Apparently it's your gain, isn't it? $50 million for being Marcus's side piece. That's quite an hourly rate. I felt heat creep up my neck. I didn't know about you. About any of it. Oh, please. She stepped into the office, her heels clicking against the hardwood. You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't know Marcus was screwing around? I just figured it was meaningless. Random hookups. Instagram models. Not a 3-year relationship with some nobody graduate student who actually thought she mattered to him. The casual cruelty in her voice made my chest tight. If you knew, why did you stay with him? Rebecca picked up a crystal paperweight from Marcus's desk, one I'd given him for his birthday last year, actually, and turned it over in her manicured hands. Because Marcus and I made sense. Same social circle, same background, same goals. We were building something together. A real life. Not some fantasy relationship in a bubble where he could play pretend. That fantasy relationship apparently taught me enough about him to inherit everything he owned. Her grip tightened on the paperweight. We'll see about that on Saturday. You might know what Marcus whispered in your ear during your little sleepovers, but I knew his real life. His business deals, his family dynamics, his actual ambitions beyond whatever romantic comedy bullshit he fed you. I wanted to argue, but she wasn't entirely wrong. Marcus had been compartmentalized with me. Softer. He'd told me about his fears and insecurities, yes, but rarely about his work or his family drama. I knew he called his mother every Sunday but had no idea what they talked about. I knew he'd started his first company in college but couldn't have told you the name of it. There's something else, Rebecca said, setting down the paperweight. His brother David? He's convinced you somehow manipulated Marcus into changing his will. He's talking about contesting the whole thing, claiming Marcus wasn't of sound mind when he made these arrangements. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? With enough lawyers and enough money? David can do whatever he wants. She smoothed down her dress and headed for the door. Just thought you should know what you're really walking into on Saturday. It's not just a trivia game, sweetheart. It's war. After she left, I stood alone in Marcus's office, surrounded by the remnants of a life I'd only ever seen pieces of. 3 days until the game, and I was already losing. I spent the rest of Wednesday afternoon going through Marcus's house like a detective at a crime scene. If this was going to be war, I needed ammunition. Rebecca was right about one thing. I knew Marcus's soft edges, but his family and friends knew his public face. I had to find the overlap, the details that mattered to both versions of him. In his bedroom dresser, behind a stack of unworn designer t-shirts, I found a shoebox that made my breath catch. Photos of us together. Not just the casual selfies I remembered taking, but printed copies that he'd apparently ordered and kept. Pictures from our weekend trip to Santa Barbara, from the hiking trail in Malibu Creek, from that terrible mini-golf date where he'd insisted he could beat me and lost spectacularly. At the bottom of the box was a letter in his handwriting, addressed to me but never sent. My hand shook as I unfolded it. Sarah. Asterisk, I know what I'm doing to you isn't fair. I know you deserve better than someone who can only love you in private. But I'm trapped in a life I built before I knew who I really wanted to be. Rebecca and I, it's what everyone expects. What makes sense on paper? But you're what makes sense in my heart, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find a way to choose you. I just need more time, asterisk. M. The letter was dated 6 months ago. 6 months he'd been planning to leave Rebecca, apparently, while I'd been beating myself up for falling for someone unavailable. I photographed the letter with my phone and kept searching. Marcus's home office yielded more treasure. His calendar was still synced to his laptop, and I scrolled through months of appointments, looking for patterns. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., Dr. Martinez therapy. Rebecca's father was a therapist, which I'd never known. Every third Friday, dinner with Mom, Soho House. Always the same restaurant. And scattered throughout, coffee with James Emergency or David Crisis Management or Kevin Needs Money Again. I was photographing his calendar when my phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah? This is Patricia Chin. Marcus's mother. My blood turned to ice. I'd met Patricia exactly 3 times in 3 years, always at Marcus's company events where she'd looked right through me like I was part of the catering staff. Mrs. Chin. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, dear. Her voice was crisp, with just a hint of her original Hong Kong accent. I'm calling because I think we should meet before Saturday. There are things about my son you should know. Things that might help you understand why he did this. This felt like a trap. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Did you know Marcus started planning this game 8 months ago? Long before his accident. He came to me, asked me about our family history in China, about stories I'd never told anyone else. He was preparing for something. 8 months ago. Right around the time he'd written that unsent letter. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you competing too? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Miss Chen, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. My son's inheritance isn't about need for me. But I think maybe it is for you. And I think that's what Marcus intended. We agreed to meet Thursday morning at a coffee shop in Santa Monica. I hung up feeling more confused than ever. Was this Marcus's mother genuinely trying to help me, or was this part of David's strategy to gather intel on what I knew? I kept searching. In Marcus's kitchen junk drawer, I found a business card for Elite Game Design, bringing your vision to life with handwritten notes on the back. Questions should reveal character, not just facts. Make them work for it. M. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop going through his house before I call the police. You have no right to be there. David. Apparently I was being watched. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I grabbed the shoebox of photos and headed for the door, my mind already racing with questions about what Marcus had really been planning, and why his own mother seemed to be rooting for the other team. Thursday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I sat across from Patricia Chin at a trendy Santa Monica coffee shop, watching her stir honey into her green tea with the same methodical precision Marcus used to bring to everything. She was smaller than I remembered, more fragile, but her eyes were sharp as she studied my face. You look tired, dear. I've been better. I wrapped my hands around my latte, needing the warmth. Mrs. Chen, why did you really want to meet? She reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Because my son was more like his father than either of us wanted to admit. Brilliant, ambitious, and absolutely terrible at handling emotions in a straightforward way. Inside the envelope were financial documents. Bank statements, investment portfolios, and what looked like contracts with a game show production company. The numbers made my head spin. Marcus had spent over $200,000 just setting up Saturday's competition. He liquidated his Apple stock to pay for this, Patricia said quietly. $200,000 for what he called his final project. When I asked him why, he said he was fixing the biggest mistake of his life. I stared at the production company contract. The game wasn't just Jeopardy style, it was a full television production, complete with cameras, professional lighting, and a studio audience of Marcus's employees and acquaintances. He planned to broadcast my humiliation, or my vindication, to everyone we'd ever known. There's something else. Patricia pulled out a second envelope, this one sealed. Marcus gave this to me 6 months ago with very specific instructions. I was only supposed to open it if he died before he could make things right, as he put it. Inside was a letter in Marcus's handwriting, but this one was addressed to his mother. Mom. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then I never found the courage to do what I should have done months ago. Sarah Chen doesn't know it yet, but she's the woman I want to spend my life with. The woman I should have chosen from the beginning. Rebecca is safe, familiar, everything you and David want for me. But Sarah challenges me, sees through my bullshit, loves me for who I am instead of what I represent, asterisk. Asterisk, the game is my apology to her. She deserves a chance at the financial security I promised but never delivered. If she wins, she'll have earned it by proving she knew me better than anyone else ever did, asterisk. Asterisk, please don't let David contest the will. Sarah has nothing. We have everything. Let her have this, asterisk. Your son. Marcus. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. He was really going to leave Rebecca? I believe so, yes. But Marcus was like his father, he overthought everything until the opportunities passed him by. Patricia folded the letter carefully. David found out about the will changes last week. He's hired Morrison, Katz and Associates to challenge her inheritance on grounds of undue influence. Morrison, Katz and Associates. Even I knew that name. They were the firm that specialized in high-stakes family legal warfare. The kind of lawyers who could tie up an estate in court for years. How long do I have? They're filing the papers Monday morning. Which means Saturday's game is likely your only chance. Patricia leaned forward. Sarah, my son left you detailed instructions about every category, hidden in places only you would think to look. He wanted you to win, but he needed it to look fair to everyone else. My phone buzzed. Text from Rebecca, coffee with Patricia? Desperate much? See you Saturday, sweetheart. I was definitely being watched. But if Marcus had left me breadcrumbs, I needed to find them fast. Mrs. Chen, why are you helping me instead of your other son? Her smile was sad but determined. Because David sees dollar signs where Marcus saw redemption. And because sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. I left the coffee shop with Patricia's envelope and more questions than answers. If Marcus had hidden clues for me, where would he put them? Somewhere only I would think to look, his mother had said. I drove back to his house, my mind cycling through every private joke, every shared moment that might hold significance. The security system beeped as I entered, and I noticed David's Tesla was parked across the street. He was definitely having me watched, but I didn't care anymore. I had maybe 48 hours before Saturday's game, and potentially my only shot at $50 million. I started in Marcus's bedroom, thinking about the mornings I'd spent there. He had this habit of reading news articles aloud to me while I was still half asleep, always from the same financial blogs. I pulled his laptop from the nightstand and opened his bookmarks folder. Between TechCrunch and Wall Street Journal was a folder labeled S's Education. Inside were dozens of saved articles about topics I'd never heard Marcus express interest in: art history, classical music, obscure scientific discoveries, even reality TV show trivia. Each article was annotated with notes in his handwriting, potential Jeopardy answers with point values assigned. Asterisk, the Kardashians premiered in what year? 200 points, Sarah watches this trash religiously, asterisk. Asterisk, which composer wrote the Ring Cycle? 400 points, remember Sarah's obsession with Wagner after that opera date, asterisk. He'd been building a database of everything I'd ever mentioned caring about, turning my interests into ammunition for his game. The bastard had been planning this for months, maybe longer. My phone rang. James Morrison, Marcus's business partner and one of Saturday's contestants. Sarah? We need to talk. Can you meet me at Republic in 30 minutes? I don't think that's a good idea, James. David Chen hired investigators to dig into your background. They found something you need to know about before Saturday. My stomach dropped. What kind of something? The kind that could disqualify you from the competition entirely. 30 minutes, Sarah. This is bigger than just the inheritance. Republic was crowded for a Thursday lunch, which I appreciated. James was already seated when I arrived, looking uncharacteristically nervous in his perfectly tailored suit. I'd always liked Marcus's business partner. He was one of the few people in Marcus's circle who'd actually been nice to me at company events. David's investigators found out about your father, James said without preamble. The blood drained from my face. What about my father? Federal prison. Embezzlement. 15-year sentence. James slid a folder across the table. David's planning to argue that criminal behavior runs in your family, that you somehow manipulated Marcus while he was emotionally vulnerable after his own father's death last year. I opened the folder with trembling hands. There it was, my father's entire criminal history, laid out in legal documents I'd hoped never to see again. Richard Chen, convicted of embezzling $2.3 million from his accounting firm's client trust fund. The reason I'd changed my major from business to literature. The reason I kept my last name despite the shame. The reason I never talked about family with Marcus. This doesn't prove anything about me, I said weakly. It doesn't have to prove anything. It just has to create reasonable doubt about your character. James leaned forward. But here's what David doesn't know, Marcus knew about your father. He had his own background check run on you 2 years ago. He what? Standard procedure for anyone who gets close to someone worth $50 million. But Sarah, Marcus kept dating you after he found out. That folder is still in his office safe, with a sticky note attached. I saw it last week when we were settling his business affairs. The note, James explained, was vintage Marcus, asterisk her father's choices don't define her. If anything, they explain why she refuses to let me pay for things. She's the most honest person I've ever met. Asterisk. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you competing on Saturday too? James looked uncomfortable. Marcus promised me a partnership buyout when he died, it's already in our business contracts. I don't need his inheritance. But he made me promise something else. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should make sure you got what he owed you. What he owed me. 3 years of your life, Sarah. 3 years of thinking you weren't good enough for his real world. James finished his coffee and stood up. The safe combination is your birthday plus his. The folder about your father is in there, along with some other things you'll want to see before Saturday. He left cash on the table and headed for the door, then turned back. One more thing. Kevin Walsh, Marcus's college roommate? He's broke. Gambling debts to some very unpleasant people. He needs this inheritance to stay alive. Just thought you should know what you're really up against. I sat alone at the table, processing everything. Marcus had known about my father's crimes and kept dating me anyway. David was planning to use my family history to destroy my credibility. Kevin was literally playing for his life. And somewhere in Marcus's safe was more evidence of just how deep his posthumous manipulation really went. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, stop digging into Marcus's business or there will be consequences. Some secrets should stay buried. Asterisk. The number was blocked, but I had a feeling David Chen was done playing nice. I drove back to Marcus's house with James's words echoing in my head, but when I pulled into the driveway, David Chen was waiting for me on the front steps. He looked like a younger, angrier version of Marcus, same sharp jawline, same expensive haircut, but with cold eyes that held none of his brother's warmth. Sarah Chen, he said, standing as I approached. We need to have a conversation. I don't think we do. I kept walking toward the front door, but he moved to block my path. Did you really think I wouldn't find out about Richard Chin? Your embezzling father who's currently serving 15 to 20 in federal prison? David's voice was calm, conversational, which somehow made it more threatening. That's quite the family legacy you're carrying. My father's crimes have nothing to do with me or Marcus. David laughed, pulling out his phone. I have security footage from this house going back 6 months. Want to know what I found? You, sneaking around Marcus's office at 3 in the morning back in February, going through his desk drawers while he was asleep upstairs. My stomach clenched. I remembered that night, I'd been looking for aspirin because Marcus was out of everything in his bathroom, and I'd grabbed some from his desk. But on camera, it would look exactly like what David was suggesting. I was getting medication for a headache. Or you were gathering information to manipulate my emotionally vulnerable brother. David stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah. You're going to skip Saturday's little game show, and I'm going to pretend I never found out about your criminal family history. Everyone wins. Except I don't win $50 million. You were never going to win anyway. His smile was sharp. Did you really think Marcus designed that game for you to succeed? You knew him for 3 years. I knew him for 28. Rebecca knew his professional life, his social circle, his business strategies. Mom knows every embarrassing childhood story and family secret. You know what he whispered to you in bed. That's not enough. But even as David spoke, I remembered Patricia Chen's words. Marcus left you detailed instructions about every category, hidden in places only you would think to look. His mother seemed to think I had a real chance, and she'd known Marcus longer than anyone. I'm not backing down, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. David's expression hardened. Then you're making a very expensive mistake. Morrison, Katz and Associates will tie this estate up in court for the next 5 years. Even if you somehow win Saturday, you'll spend every penny fighting legal challenges. We have unlimited resources, Sarah. You have student loan debt and a father in federal prison. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and that threatening text you received earlier? That wasn't from me. Kevin Walsh is in deeper trouble than James Morrison probably told you. Apparently he owes money to some very impatient people who think $50 million would solve his problems nicely. Just something to consider before Saturday. After David left, I sat in Marcus's driveway with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Kevin Walsh, the college roommate I'd met exactly twice, was apparently desperate enough to threaten me. David had an army of lawyers ready to destroy my life. Rebecca knew Marcus's public face better than I ever would. And his mother, despite her apparent support, was still competing against me. But Marcus had spent $200,000 and 8 months planning this game. He'd researched my interests, hidden clues in places only I would find, and written letters declaring his intention to choose me over the life everyone expected him to live. Maybe David was right that I only knew the private version of his brother. But maybe that private version was the only one that really mattered. I walked to the front door and punched in the security code, my birthday, just like always. Time to find out what Marcus had hidden in his safe, and whether his final game was really designed for me to win or just elaborate enough for me to hope. The safe was behind Marcus's college diploma, Harvard Business School, which he'd mentioned exactly once in 3 years of dating. The combination James had given me worked on the first try, my birthday plus Marcus's. Inside, I found a folder about my father that James had mentioned, along with something that made my breath catch. A flash drive labeled Sarah's prep materials in Marcus's careful handwriting. I plugged it into his laptop, and a video file opened. Marcus, sitting in the same office chair, looking directly into the camera. He was wearing the blue button-down I'd bought him for his birthday, the one he claimed was his favorite. Hi, sweetheart. His voice was soft, intimate, the tone he used when we were alone. If you're watching this, then I'm dead and you're probably freaking out about Saturday's game. Don't. I started crying before I could stop myself. 3 weeks since the accident, and hearing his voice again felt like being punched in the chest. I know what everyone's going to tell you, that you don't know enough about my real life to win. That Rebecca or David or my mom understands me better. But here's what they don't know, I've been 2 different people for most of my life. The version everyone expects, and the version I actually am. You're the only person who ever met the real me. He leaned forward, closer to the camera. The categories for Saturday are tech industry trivia, Chin family history, Stanford memories, personal fears, secret dreams, and pop culture guilty pleasures. I'm going to give you everything you need to dominate 5 of those 6 categories. For the next 40 minutes, Marcus walked me through a master class in his hidden life. His biggest fear wasn't failure, it was ending up like his father, brilliant but emotionally unavailable. His secret dream wasn't building a bigger company, it was writing a novel about growing up caught between Chinese and American cultures. He'd been working on it for 2 years, writing before dawn while I was still asleep beside him. Tech industry will be Rebecca's strongest category, he said. Let her have it. David knows the most family history, but only the official version. Mom never told him about our grandfather's first wife in Hong Kong, or why Dad really left Chin Industries. You'll find those stories in the red notebook in my bedroom nightstand. He paused, running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was nervous. Sarah, I'm recording this because I'm planning to leave Rebecca next month, and I know that's going to create legal complications for my will. If something happens to me before I can make things right, this game is your chance to claim what should have been yours anyway. The video ended with Marcus looking directly into the camera. You know me better than anyone ever has. Trust that knowledge, and don't let them convince you otherwise. I love you, sweetheart. Win my stupid game. I was still crying when my phone rang. Kevin Walsh. Sarah, we need to meet. Tonight. It's about Saturday's game. I don't think that's a good idea, Kevin. Listen carefully. His voice was tight with desperation. I owe $300,000 to people who don't accept payment plans. David Chin promised me information about the game categories if I helped him get rid of you. But I found something better than categories. I found Marcus's practice questions. My blood went cold. What practice questions? He ran through dozens of trial games over the past few months, testing different questions and point values. I have recordings, Sarah. Audio files of him practicing with a professional quiz show host. I know exactly which questions he's planning to use Saturday. How much do you want? Not money. A deal. We work together Saturday, pool our knowledge, and split the inheritance 50-50. 25 million each is enough to solve both our problems. I thought about Marcus's video, about his certainty that I could win on my own. But Kevin was offering me a guarantee, and David's legal threats were very real. I'll call you back, I said. You have 2 hours to decide, Sarah. After that, I'm taking David's deal instead. I stared at my phone after Kevin hung up, my mind racing. 2 hours to decide between guaranteed money and the risk of losing everything. Marcus's voice from the video still echoed in my head. Asterisk, you know me better than anyone ever has. Trust that knowledge. Asterisk, but trusting that knowledge meant gambling on my ability to beat people who'd known him longer, and Kevin's offer was starting to look like a smart play. I opened the red notebook Marcus had mentioned, finding it exactly where he'd said it would be. His grandfather's story was there in Marcus's careful handwriting. How Chin Wei had fled Shanghai in 1949 with his pregnant first wife, only to lose her in childbirth in Hong Kong. How he'd remarried Patricia's mother and never spoken of his first family again, building Chin Industries on the foundation of that buried grief. David didn't know any of this. It was the kind of family secret that could easily be worth 800 or 1,000 points in Saturday's game. But one category wouldn't be enough if Kevin really had access to Marcus's practice questions. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Asterisk, enjoying your little scavenger hunt? Some of us don't need cheat sheets to remember our relationships. Asterisk. She was watching me too. Of course she was. Marcus's house probably had more surveillance on it than the Pentagon at this point. I kept reading through Marcus's hidden notes, finding story after story I'd never heard. How he'd started his first company, Teach Tech, not to make money but because his Stanford roommate, Kevin Walsh, had been failing computer science and needed tutoring software to graduate. How the company's first major investor had been Rebecca's father, Dr. Martinez, who'd put up $50,000 in exchange for Marcus dating his daughter. How Marcus had been trapped in that relationship ever since, feeling obligated to a man who believed in him when no one else would. The business arrangement explained so much, why Rebecca had been so confident about their engagement, why Marcus had seemed resigned rather than excited when he'd mentioned wedding planning. Their entire relationship had been a transaction that got out of hand. But it also meant Rebecca's father had a financial stake in Marcus's success that went back 8 years. If Dr. Martinez had invested early in Teach Tech, he could have made millions when Marcus sold the company. Enough to hire very expensive lawyers to make sure his daughter inherited Marcus's estate. I was photographing the notebook pages when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw Kevin Walsh walking up the driveway, and he looked terrible, hollow-eyed, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in at Marcus's funeral. Whatever gambling debts he'd racked up, they were clearly destroying him. I met him at the front door. I said I'd call you back. Time's running out, Sarah. For both of us. He pulled out his phone and played an audio file. Marcus's voice filled the air, clear and familiar. Final Jeopardy category is Secret Dreams. The answer is this novel about Chinese-American identity has been his passion project for 2 years, written every morning from 5 to 7 a.m. My stomach dropped. That was the exact secret Marcus had shared in his video message, his novel about growing up between cultures. Kevin really did have access to the actual questions. How did you get these recordings? Marcus hired me to help test the game. Paid me $5,000 a session to play against him while he refined the questions. Kevin's laugh was bitter. I thought it was just another one of his weird projects. I had no idea he was planning to cut everyone else out of his will. So you know all the questions? Most of them. But here's the thing, Marcus made multiple versions of each category. He's got backups for his backups. Kevin stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. We need each other, Sarah. You know which version of Marcus he really was, and I know which questions he's actually going to ask. Without me, you're guessing. Without you, I'm just gambling again. My phone rang. Patricia Chen. Sarah, dear, are you still at Marcus's house? You need to leave. Now. Why? What's wrong? David just left my house. He's driving to Malibu with a court order to secure the property. If he finds you there going through Marcus's things, he can claim you're tampering with evidence. I could already hear sirens in the distance. Kevin grabbed my arm. Decide, Sarah. Right now. Partners, or we both lose everything. The sirens were getting closer. I had maybe 3 minutes before David arrived with whatever legal authority he'd managed to buy. Kevin was holding the key to guaranteed victory, but taking his deal would mean admitting I couldn't win on my own merit. And something about his desperation made me wonder if his information was as reliable as he claimed. 25 million each, Kevin pressed. Split down the middle. We both win. I looked at Marcus's house one last time, thinking about the man who'd loved me enough to design an elaborate game just to give me a chance at financial freedom. The man who believed I knew him better than anyone else ever had. I'll see you Saturday, Kevin, I said. But I'm playing alone. Kevin's face went white as I walked away from his offer. The sirens were getting louder, and I needed to get out of there before David arrived with his court order. I grabbed the flash drive and red notebook, leaving everything else behind as I headed for my car. You're making a huge mistake. Kevin called after me. Those people will destroy you on Saturday. You think Marcus's bedtime stories are going to beat 28 years of family history? Maybe he was right. But as I drove away from Marcus's house for what might be the last time, I kept hearing the confidence in Marcus's voice from that video. You know me better than anyone ever has. He'd spent 8 months and $200,000 setting up this game. I had to trust that he'd designed it for me to win. My phone rang as I merged onto PCH. Unknown number again. Sarah? This is Dr. Martinez. Rebecca's father. We need to talk. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. The man who'd financially trapped Marcus into a relationship with his daughter was the last person I wanted to speak with right now. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Dr. Martinez. On the contrary, we have quite a lot to discuss. Including the fact that I know exactly why Marcus changed his will, and it had nothing to do with love. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, my hands shaking. What are you talking about? Marcus came to see me in January. Professional consultation. He was having what he called intrusive thoughts about his relationship with Rebecca. Guilt, anxiety, feeling trapped by obligation. Dr. Martinez's voice was clinical, detached. I prescribed medication to help with his decision-making process. Medication? Antidepressants can sometimes cause what we call impulsive behavior modification. Poor judgment. Risky financial decisions. Sudden changes in relationship priorities. The implication hung heavy between us. Marcus began altering his will shortly after starting his prescription. My blood turned to ice. You're saying he wasn't thinking clearly when he planned the game? I'm saying a jury might find it interesting that a man on mood-altering medication suddenly decided to leave $50 million to his secret girlfriend instead of his fiancée of 5 years. Dr. Martinez paused. Of course, medical records are confidential. Unless they become relevant to a legal proceeding. The threat was crystal clear. If I didn't back down, Rebecca's father would testify that Marcus had been mentally compromised when he changed his will. A respected psychiatrist claiming medication had impaired Marcus's judgment would be devastating in court. What do you want? Withdraw from Saturday's competition. Rebecca inherits as originally intended, and Marcus's medical history stays private. Everyone wins. Except me. Miss Chen, you're a graduate student with crushing debt. Do you really want to spend the next 5 years of your life in legal battles you can't afford to fight? His tone softened, becoming almost paternal. Take the dignified exit. There are other ways to build financial security. After he hung up, I sat in my car feeling the walls closing in from every direction. David had hired investigators and expensive lawyers. Kevin was desperate enough to make deals with anyone who'd help him. Rebecca knew Marcus's professional life better than I ever would. And now Dr. Martinez was threatening to destroy Marcus's reputation to protect his daughter's inheritance. But there was something about his call that bothered me. If Marcus really had been impaired by medication, why had Dr. Martinez waited until now to mention it? And why had Marcus been so methodical in his game preparation, so detailed in his video message to me? I drove home to my cramped Van Nuys apartment and spent Friday night going through every piece of information I'd gathered. Marcus's practice materials, his family secrets, his hidden confessions about wanting to write novels and escape the life everyone expected him to live. The more I studied his notes, the more convinced I became that the game wasn't just about trivia, it was about understanding who Marcus really was beneath all the expectations and obligations. Saturday morning arrived gray and foggy, typical June weather in Malibu. I dressed carefully, the black dress Marcus had bought me for our first fancy dinner together, the one Rebecca had never seen because it belonged to our private world. If I was going to fight for Marcus's final gift, I was going to do it wearing something that reminded me why he'd loved me in the first place. The game began at 2 p.m. By 1:30, I was sitting in my car outside Marcus's estate, watching the other contestants arrive for what might be the most important 90 minutes of my life. I watched through my windshield as the other contestants gathered on Marcus's front steps like actors preparing for opening night. Rebecca arrived in a chauffeur-driven Mercedes, wearing a crisp white blazer that screamed confidence. David pulled up in his Tesla, checking his phone with the focused intensity of someone coordinating a military operation. Patricia Chen emerged from a modest Honda Civic, carrying what looked like a photo album, family pictures, probably ammunition for the Chen family history category. James Morrison was already there, leaning against the front door in his perfectly tailored suit, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. And Kevin Walsh. Kevin looked like he hadn't slept in days. He kept pacing the driveway, checking his phone, glancing toward the street like he was expecting someone to arrive and drag him away. At 1:45, a black production truck pulled up, followed by 2 vans full of equipment. This wasn't just a family game, Marcus had hired a full television crew to document everything. Cameras, professional lighting, sound equipment, even what looked like a red carpet leading to the front door. My humiliation or vindication was going to be preserved in high definition. I was still sitting in my car, paralyzed by the scope of what Marcus had orchestrated, when someone tapped on my passenger window. Patricia Chen stood there with a gentle smile, motioning for me to unlock the door. Nervous, dear? She asked, sliding into the passenger seat. Terrified, I admitted. Your other son has an army of lawyers. Rebecca's father is threatening to claim Marcus was mentally impaired. Kevin apparently has access to practice questions. And I'm sitting here with notebook pages and a flash drive, hoping that's enough. Patricia opened her photo album, revealing pictures I'd never seen before. Marcus as a child, serious and bookish, always standing slightly apart from David in family photos. Marcus at Stanford, grinning beside Kevin Walsh in what looked like their dorm room. Marcus at various company events over the years, his smile getting more forced as time went on. David thinks he knows Marcus because they shared a bedroom for 18 years, Patricia said softly. Rebecca thinks she knows him because they attended the same social events. But look at these pictures, Sarah. Really look. I studied the photos more carefully. In every single image, Marcus looked like he was performing rather than living. Even in candid shots, there was something guarded about his expression, like he was always conscious of being watched and judged. Now look at this. Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me a photo I'd never seen, Marcus and me at the Santa Monica Pier, probably taken by a stranger we'd asked to capture the moment. In it, Marcus looked completely different. Relaxed, genuinely laughing, his arm around me like he never wanted to let go. I took this from his phone after the accident, Patricia said. It was his wallpaper. Not a professional headshot or a picture with Rebecca at some charity gala. This candid moment with you. A production assistant approached my car window, clipboard in hand. Sarah Chen? We're ready to begin. My phone buzzed with a final text from an unknown number, last chance to reconsider. Some games aren't worth playing. A friend. But as I looked at that photo of Marcus and me at the pier, I remembered something he'd said that day. We'd been talking about his work stress, his family expectations, the constant pressure to be perfect. Sometimes I think the only time I can breathe is when I'm with you, he'd whispered. You're the only person who doesn't need me to be anyone except myself. That was the Marcus who designed this game. Not the polished entrepreneur or the dutiful son or the society fiancé, but the man who dreamed of writing novels and felt trapped by other people's expectations. The man who'd loved me enough to spend $200,000 on one last chance to make things right. I got out of my car and walked toward the house, Patricia beside me, ready to fight for the inheritance Marcus had always intended me to have. The production team had transformed Marcus's living room into a perfect replica of the Jeopardy set, complete with podiums arranged in a semicircle and that iconic blue backdrop. Professional cameras flanked every angle, and I counted at least 30 people in the studio audience, Marcus's employees, college friends, and various hangers-on who'd probably never spoken to him but wanted front row seats to the drama. Alex Morrison, the former Jeopardy head writer Marcus had hired, stood at the host podium looking appropriately solemn. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what Marcus Chen called his final Jeopardy. Before we begin, I need to read a statement from the deceased. He pulled out an envelope sealed with red wax, theatrical even in death, classic Marcus. To my family, friends, and Sarah, this game represents my attempt to determine who truly knew me, not just the version of myself I presented to the world. The winner will inherit my estate not because they loved me most, but because they understood me best. May the best knowledge of Marcus Chen win. I took my place at the podium marked Sarah, flanked by Rebecca on my left and David on my right. Patricia stood beside James, while Kevin occupied the far right position, still looking like he might bolt for the exit. Each podium had a tablet for submitting answers and a small screen showing our current scores. Round 1 begins now, Morrison announced. Categories are Tech Industry Titans, Chen Family Secrets, Stanford Days, Hidden Passions, Deepest Fears, and Pop Culture Confessions. David, you have the honor of selecting first. Chen Family Secrets for 400, David said confidently. The answer appeared on the main screen. This relative's death in 1962 led to Marcus's grandfather changing the family name from Wei to Chen. I felt my heart race. This was exactly the kind of obscure family history David should have known but didn't. Thanks to Marcus's red notebook, I knew the answer, his grandfather's first wife, who died in childbirth in Hong Kong. But I had to be careful not to seem too knowledgeable too early. Rebecca buzzed in first. Who was his grandmother Patricia's mother? Incorrect, Morrison said. Sarah? Who was Chen Wei's first wife? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Correct for 400 points. I caught Patricia's small smile from the audience. David's expression darkened. He clearly hadn't expected me to know family history that predated his birth. Sarah, you control the board. Hidden Passions for 600. This creative pursuit has occupied Marcus's early morning hours for the past 2 years, inspired by his struggle with cultural identity. My breath caught. This was straight from Marcus's video message, his secret novel about growing up between Chinese and American cultures. But Kevin was already reaching for his buzzer, probably recognizing this from the practice sessions Marcus had mentioned. I buzzed in a split second before him. What is writing a novel? Correct for 600. Kevin's face went white. He'd expected that question to be his ace in the hole, but my relationship with Marcus had given me access to the same information. I was ahead 1,000 to 0, but we were barely 5 minutes into what could be a 90-minute battle. Hidden Passions for 800, I continued, trying to maintain my early momentum. Marcus secretly took lessons in this skill every Thursday evening, telling friends he was attending business networking events. I had no idea. Thursday evenings were usually when Marcus claimed to be busy with work obligations, one of the many ways our relationship had been compartmentalized. Rebecca was already buzzing in. What is cooking? She said confidently. He took private chef lessons from Pierre Dubois at Lou Bernardin. Correct for 800 points. My stomach dropped. Rebecca was right, and more importantly, she knew specific details like the instructor's name and location. Maybe David had been correct that my intimate knowledge of Marcus wouldn't be enough to compete with 5 people who'd known different aspects of his public life. The game was far from over, but I was already learning that Marcus Chen had been keeping secrets from everyone, including me. The categories were revealing everyone's strengths faster than I'd anticipated. David dominated Chen family secrets, rattling off obscure relatives and business details with the confidence of someone who'd grown up hearing these stories at dinner tables I was never invited to. Rebecca swept most of tech industry titans, displaying an encyclopedic knowledge of Marcus's business dealings, investment strategies, and professional relationships that made my head spin. But I held my own in Hidden Passions and Pop Culture Confessions. When the answer was this reality dating show was Marcus's guilty pleasure, watched religiously every Tuesday night, I buzzed in before anyone else could blink. What is The Bachelor? I said, remembering countless Tuesday evenings when Marcus would pretend to work on his laptop while actually streaming episodes on his tablet. Correct for 1,000 points. Rebecca's jaw tightened. She clearly hadn't known about Marcus's secret trash TV addiction, probably because he'd hidden it from his sophisticated fiancée the same way he'd hidden our entire relationship. By the end of round 1, the scores were closer than anyone had expected. David led with 4,200 points, I had 3,800, Rebecca had 3,600, Patricia surprised everyone with 2,400, James coasted at 1,800, and Kevin was struggling at 1,200. The audience was riveting. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes analyzing every answer, every hesitation, every reveal about Marcus's secret life. Round 2 begins now, Morrison announced. Point values double, and we'll see our contestants' knowledge tested on a deeper level. The categories shifted: advanced family history, business failures, relationship regrets, future dreams, childhood trauma, and personal philosophies. My palms were sweating as I realized these topics would require the kind of intimate emotional knowledge that only came from years of pillow talk and 3 a.m. confessions. Rebecca, you're currently in second place. Please select. Relationship regrets for 800. The answer made my breath catch. Marcus told this person in January 2023 that staying engaged was the biggest mistake of my life, but he didn't know how to fix it without destroying everyone. The room went dead silent. This was explosive, a direct confession that Marcus had wanted to leave Rebecca, said to someone in this room just 5 months before his death. Rebecca's face had gone pale, and I could see her hands trembling as she stared at the screen. Kevin buzzed in first, his voice shaky. Who is Sarah? Incorrect, Morrison said. Anyone else? I knew this wasn't me. Marcus had never said those exact words to me, though he'd expressed similar sentiments. Patricia looked stricken, like she might know the answer but didn't want to say it. James was studying his shoes. Who is Dr. Martinez? I said suddenly, remembering his phone call about Marcus seeking therapy. Correct for 800 points. Rebecca's face crumpled. The answer meant her own father had known Marcus wanted to leave her, had been treating him for the emotional distress their relationship was causing. The betrayal was written across her features, not just Marcus's deception, but her father's failure to warn her what was coming. Sarah controls the board, Morrison announced, but I barely heard him over the murmur of shock rippling through the audience. David was staring at Rebecca with undisguised satisfaction, clearly pleased that his brother's fiancée was being publicly humiliated. Kevin looked nauseated, probably realizing his practice sessions with Marcus hadn't prepared him for questions this personal. And Patricia was watching me with something that might have been pride, or possibly concern about how much more family devastation this game might reveal. I was now tied for first place at 4,600 points, but the emotional cost was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. Childhood trauma for 1,200, I said, hoping Marcus had trusted me with enough painful memories to maintain my lead. The answer that appeared made my stomach drop. At age 8, Marcus developed this psychological condition after witnessing a traumatic family event that David was too young to remember. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Marcus had mentioned childhood anxiety in passing, but never with this level of clinical specificity. This was the kind of deep family knowledge that only Patricia would know, or possibly David if he'd paid attention to family medical history. Kevin buzzed in desperately. What is PTSD? Incorrect. David looked confident as he hit his buzzer. What is obsessive-compulsive disorder? From when Dad had his first heart attack and Marcus thought his bedtime rituals could prevent it from happening again. Correct for 1,200 points. Patricia's face had gone ashen in the audience. I realized I was watching her relive a family trauma she'd probably spent decades trying to help Marcus overcome. David now led at 5,400 points, pulling ahead of me by 800. But something about David's answer bothered me. The clinical confidence, the specific details about bedtime rituals. Marcus had never mentioned OCD or his father's heart attack to me, but he had talked about his need to control everything, his inability to leave tasks unfinished. Suddenly his obsession with planning this game made perfect sense. It was his final attempt to control an outcome after death. David controls the board, Morrison announced. Business failures for 1,600. This startup company, co-founded by Marcus in 2019, failed after 8 months when this person's gambling addiction led to embezzled funds. My blood went cold. Kevin's face had turned gray, and I saw him glance toward the exit like a trapped animal. This wasn't just trivia anymore. Marcus was exposing everyone's secrets from beyond the grave. Who is Kevin Walsh? Rebecca said quickly, her voice sharp with newfound understanding. Correct for 1,600 points. The audience was buzzing now, whispered conversations breaking out as people realized they weren't just watching a game show, they were witnessing a systematic demolition of family and friend relationships. Kevin's gambling addiction explained his desperation, his threats, his willingness to make deals with anyone who'd help him win. Rebecca controls the board. Future dreams for 2,000. I held my breath, hoping this would be another question about Marcus's secret novel or his desire to escape his predetermined life. Instead, the answer made my heart sink. Marcus planned to announce this major life change at Christmas 2023, a decision he'd been building toward for 18 months. 18 months. That would have been right around the time Marcus and I started getting serious, when our relationship shifted from casual dating to something deeper. Rebecca was already buzzing in, but so was I, both of us desperate to control this narrative. Who is Sarah? Rebecca said, beating me by milliseconds. He was going to announce their engagement and break up with me. Incorrect, Morrison said. Sarah? My mind was blank. If it wasn't our engagement Marcus had been planning to announce, what life change had he been working toward for 18 months? What is, leaving Chin Industries? I guessed wildly. Starting his own company? Incorrect. Patricia? Marcus's mother looked directly at me as she answered, her voice steady but sad. What is coming out as gay? He'd been seeing a therapist to find the courage to tell the family he was never attracted to women. The room exploded into chaos. The silence that followed Patricia's revelation was deafening. Rebecca's face had gone completely white, her hand frozen halfway to her buzzer. David was staring at his mother with an expression of pure shock. Kevin looked like he might be sick. And I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Marcus was gay. 3 years of relationship, 3 years of intimacy I thought we'd shared, and he'd been, what? Using me as cover? As practice for a heterosexual life he never actually wanted? That's impossible, David said, his voice cracking. Marcus was engaged to Rebecca. He dated Sarah for 3 years. Patricia's expression was infinitely sad as she looked at her surviving son. Marcus was terrified of disappointing the family. Of not being the perfect heir you and your father expected. The women in his life weren't relationships, David. They were performances. My tablet screen was flashing, showing I dropped to third place at 4,600 points while Rebecca and David pulled ahead. But the numbers felt meaningless now. Everything Marcus had said to me, every intimate moment we'd shared, every promise about leaving Rebecca, it had all been an elaborate lie he was telling himself as much as me. Sarah controls the board, Morrison announced, his professional composure barely intact as the audience buzzed with shocked conversations. I stared at the categories, my mind reeling. Personal philosophies for 2,000 was still available, the highest point value left. If I was going to win this inheritance, I needed to compartmentalize my devastation and focus on the game Marcus had designed. Personal philosophies for 2,000, I said, my voice hollow. The answer appeared. Marcus believed this was the most important quality in any relationship, telling his therapist in March 2023 that he'd never experienced it with anyone, male or female. Dr. Martinez again. Marcus's therapy sessions were becoming the backbone of this entire game, revealing truths none of us had known while he was alive. But what quality had Marcus never experienced? Love seemed too obvious. Trust, maybe? Kevin buzzed in first, probably grateful for any question that didn't expose more of his own secrets. What is honesty? Correct for 2,000 points. The irony was staggering. Marcus had spent years lying to everyone about his sexuality, his feelings, his intentions, and he'd told his therapist that honesty was the most important thing in relationships. Kevin had jumped to 3,200 points, still trailing but no longer in last place. Kevin controls the board. Personal philosophies for 1,600. In his final therapy session, Marcus said he planned to reveal his sexuality by doing this specific action at the family Christmas dinner. I watched Kevin's face carefully as he read the question. His expression shifted from confusion to something like recognition. He'd clearly heard Marcus mention this plan during one of their practice sessions. But before he could buzz in, Patricia beat him to it. "What is bringing his boyfriend Michael to dinner?" she said quietly. "He'd been seeing someone for 6 months. A pediatric surgeon at Cedars-Sinai. Michael. Marcus had a boyfriend named Michael that none of us knew about. While he was sleeping in my bed and planning elaborate games to win me $50 million, he was also building a real relationship with someone else. The layers of deception were making me dizzy." Rebecca suddenly started laughing, a sharp, hysterical sound that echoed off the walls. "So we're all idiots," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Every single one of us. He was lying to everyone." "Rebecca," Patricia said gently, "Marcus was lying to himself most of all." The score stood at David 5,400, Rebecca 5,200, me 4,600, Kevin 3,200, Patricia 2,400, and James still coasting at 1,800. But with final Jeopardy approaching and point values potentially doubling again, anyone could still win. The question was whether I even wanted to anymore. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos in the room. "We now move to final Jeopardy. Contestants, please write your wagers." I stared at my tablet, my mind spinning. David led with 5,400 points, Rebecca had 5,200, and I sat at 4,600. Mathematically, I could still win if I wagered everything and got the final question right while the others got it wrong. But did I even want Marcus's money anymore, knowing it came from a man who'd built his entire life on lies? The final Jeopardy category appeared on the main screen, Marcus's greatest truth. My stylus hovered over the tablet. Everything in me wanted to bet zero, to walk away from this elaborate manipulation. But then I remembered my student loan balance, $127,000. I remembered my broken air conditioning and grocery store wine dinners. I remembered that even if Marcus had lied about everything else, he'd still chosen to give me a chance at financial freedom when he could have left it all to Rebecca by default. I wagered 4,600 points. Everything. The final answer is, Morrison announced. Marcus wrote in his journal the night before he died, "Tomorrow I'm going to tell the truth about this, the one thing I should have admitted years ago." My blood went cold. The night before his accident, Marcus had planned to confess something. But what truth? His sexuality? His feelings about Rebecca? His relationship with Michael? I closed my eyes, trying to remember our last conversation. We talked on the phone around 10 p.m., just casual goodnight pleasantries. He'd seemed distracted but not upset. What had he said? Something about having a big day tomorrow and needing to finally handle some unfinished business. David was already writing his answer, confident as always. Rebecca looked devastated, probably assuming Marcus had planned to break up with her. Kevin was frantically scribbling, likely guessing about the gambling debts or business failures. But I kept thinking about that shoebox of photos I'd found in Marcus's dresser. Pictures he'd printed and kept hidden, moments from our relationship he'd preserved like treasures. If Marcus had been gay, if I'd just been a performance, why keep those photos? Why write that unsent love letter? Why design this entire game around giving me his fortune? Unless. I wrote my answer just as time expired. What is that he loved Sarah despite being gay? Morrison collected our tablets and began to reveal. David, you wagered 3,000 points and wrote, "What is his sexuality?" That is incorrect, leaving you with 2,400 points. Rebecca, you wagered 5,200 points and wrote, "What is that he never loved me?" Also incorrect, leaving you with 0 points. Kevin, you wagered 2,000 points and wrote, "What is his gambling problem?" Incorrect, leaving you with 1,200 points. Patricia, you wagered 1,000 points and wrote, "What is that he was afraid to be himself?" Close, but incorrect, leaving you with 1,400 points. James, you wagered nothing and wrote, "What is that business partnerships are more honest than family relationships?" Incorrect, but you maintain 1,800 points. Morrison turned to me last. Sarah, you wagered everything 4,600 points. You wrote, "What is that he loved Sarah despite being gay?" Let's see if you're correct. The room held its breath as Morrison opened the final envelope Marcus had left. The correct answer is, "What is that he loved Sarah Chin completely and honestly, the only real love he'd ever experienced regardless of gender." My legs gave out. I grabbed the podium to keep from falling as Morrison continued reading from Marcus's final journal entry. Gender stopped mattering when I met Sarah. She's the only person I've ever loved for who they are rather than what they represent. Tomorrow I'm telling her everything and asking her to marry me, Michael be damned. Some love transcends every category we try to put it in. The final score flashed on screen, Sarah Chen, 9,200 points. Winner. $50 million. But more importantly, the knowledge that Marcus had loved me exactly as much as I'd loved him, just in a way that was more complicated than either of us had understood. Through my tears, I saw Rebecca walking toward me. For a moment I braced for anger, but instead she pulled me into an unexpected hug. "He really did love you," she whispered. We were both just part of his journey to figuring that out. 6 months later, I paid off my student loans, bought a modest house in Santa Monica, and started the Marcus Chin Foundation for LGBTQ+ youth. Because some inheritances are about more than money, they're about understanding that love, like people, doesn't always fit into the categories we expect. Marcus's final game had revealed his greatest truth, that authenticity matters more than performance, and love transcends every label we try to put on it.